For the next session, we have Wen and Bertrand here joining me. Thanks for coming.
Hi.
It's very great to have you
here.
having
us.
You have a very interesting description, which really kind of, it's simple, but it kind of really made me change the questions I would ask you. And you wrote on the side, the portfolio, that you make people see things in a different way.
Yes.
Right? So how different is it? Radically different? Do you want to make a huge impact so people really see things differently?
Yes, I think because I'm coming from another culture, so when I moved to Europe, like it's a big culture shock to me. I mean, it's totally a different world and a different style. And so when I start working in Europe, and then there's a conflict like between my culture and this new culture, and it's interesting because it's not what I'm familiar with. And so the more I work, actually it inspired me, so I got more ideas. This kind of how this project started. And so I start to think about, okay, is there another way to tell this story? And also I want to put my culture into the storytelling. Right. So I start thinking, okay, if I use my more like Eastern style to address the story, like how it would look like and how it will be.
Right. But maybe you could also just give us some insight, just a little bit insight about the work that you're doing. So, because not everybody watched the talk in the morning today.
Yeah.
Right. So, what are the crazy things that you're actually doing on a regular basis?
I don't know. We did another experiment where we put like the map of constellation into a dome, and people can control it with Elite Motion. And the thing we quite like about it is like something like everyone knows about, like the stars and the constellation, but we actually never really look at it. So like, and I think that's what we meant by looking at things in different ways. Just like if we put them in a digital world, people will be like, with an interesting interaction, would be like intrigued by it and wanted to explore it, and then rediscovering things which already exist, but in a different way, and like giving another look.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean the project Bertrand mentioned, it's one of the biggest challenge to us, like how you visualize the whole night sky and how you navigate as well, because you want to be able to see everything. It's not just a hemisphere. You have the whole sphere, and how you position yourself, and then how you move things together, how the interaction should be. It's always a big challenge, but big fun. Yes.
But if we also go back to the roots of what you actually mentioned about your origins from Taiwan, you also worked on this project which involved Taiwanese ink.
Yes.
We kind of try to connect it somehow with, with modern technologies. Maybe you could share a bit more about this project.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting that we have this idea of the Eastern world. The sort of like a Chinese style map first. That's our initial thoughts, and then when we start with some prototypes for sure. And at the beginning was just using like 2D layers, but that put them into the 3D world. It's interesting, but then there's a one day when I just walk back to my house, and then I suddenly got an idea like, what if I just record an ink drop on paper, and then put it onto a mountain? How will it look like? And then so at the moment I really don't know like what's going to happen, but I just think it might be interesting. So I done a lot of tests during that night and just put some ink drop, and then when I put it into the 3D model, use that to texture the 3D model, and for us, like it feels really close to what we saw in the Eastern drawing, especially the watercolor drawings, and then that become one of the starting point for this project. And we start, this really looks close to what we want to achieve, and it's interesting as well.
Okay, so maybe when we kind of look more into the VR side of things. I'm curious at this point, so when we're talking about designing and building VR, what does it mean in terms of the tooling? I know that you're kind of more on the development side of things.
Yeah.
So are tools good enough today that will enable us to create those experiences almost effortlessly? Or is there a lot of improvement that has to be done? Can designers rely on them today?
I think because this is our first project, like with this scale, like in VR. So we kind of like start from scratch. We're kind of like searching, and I do believe there's a lot of room for building the tool for VR. I think already a lot of people thinking about this. Like you can see people start to think about what if they can directly model the thing in VR,
yes,
or directly texture the thing in VR. I think these are a great tool, and it's going to help people to build VR like greatly. And I think for now there's not too much, or at least I don't know too much about these two exist. But I think in the future, yes, there will be more and more.
Okay, so from the design perspective, is it difficult? Like, what are the main challenges that you see when designing for VR?
Well, in terms of design, there's not. I guess it's a bit the same. It's more about how you tell the story, which is very different, and you have to think in a different way. Because first of all, is where you position the user. Because on a normal experience, it's kind of like there is a differentiation between like you as a user on the screen, and in this case, you are completely immersed. And where does the user set? Is it like the main character or spectator or an element in the decor?
So you would also assign a role.
Exactly.
First. But would you then start with kind of designing the space, or would you start with the interaction? What is the user supposed to be able to do?
In this case, we actually started in a kind of quite traditional way. We started with the drawings and the storyboards, and trying to kind of break out the story. And the way where we end up like the best solution we found was to make it by chapters. So, because one of the main issues we had was with camera and how people quickly feel sick if you make camera moving. So you cannot like approach it as a film where we've got action scene and cut and you end up somewhere else and the camera moving and other people will be like too dizzy and fall on the floor. So we end up with this idea of like making chapters and breaking points where people like reset in a different place and like see the story unfold in the best point of view, and then on top of that we think about like interaction and how we can bring more life to the story. So we really kind of take the story as a backbone and then build on top of the story.
Okay, and so when you start working on it, so I'm really curious about the transition from traditional drawings into the actual models. What does it look like? I mean, I don't have any experience in designing for VR. I'm just curious what the steps are.
Well,
I think it's kind of like build up like naturally. When we start with a more traditional way in 2D and it looks good, and then we discover like we can use the ink drug I mentioned and in 3D, and then suddenly you're in the full 3D world, and then once you start moving the camera around, then you get more sense about, oh yeah, there's opportunity here. Like Bert mentioned about these camera angles. Actually, we discover them after we start building the world, because while we are prototyping, we start to try different angles. Like, do we want to start it low, or do we want to start it high, or bird views?
Right.
And when we start to explore different angles, and then the more idea come to us, and then we start, okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, we need something here. We start to make like, okay, let's make a storm scene. Right. And then we drop in the rain and the thunder and other stuff.
So do you feel like God's creating those universes and doing whatever you feel like?
Yes, in
maybe
a
with
way,
a few little magic keyboard strokes that change the entire experience?
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah?
I would say like there's one thing which we do often in our project is like we kind of feed each other with inspiration. And one thing that Wen is very good at is prototyping and making tools for me then to experiment on. So he uses like a WebGL tool on Chrome, and he sent me a link, and then I can play with it, add my own assets, and build the things. And we did it a lot on this one to kind of texture the world and like playing around. So it was still like browser based, but it kind of managed to us to kind of build a first structure before we get into the proper like VR things.
Right. Yeah. We have a couple of questions coming in about exactly this.
Okay.
And what we discovered today in the morning is that there is no designing for VR. If you're designing for virtual reality, you're designing for VRs, because there are very different devices that are very different in terms of the user interaction and capabilities, right? Yeah. So it requires you to really think carefully about what exactly you're targeting. Yeah. But what would be the design software that you would be using for designing for VR? And what would be the development software you would be using as well?
I'll be, personally on a design point of view, I'll be using After Effects.
After Effects, okay.
Yeah.
And from the development point of view?
I think I still use, because we're using web-based language, so I'm still using JavaScript. So like any text editor, like as most of them can cover the needs.
And what about browser support?
I mean, this.
Well, like
Yeah, this our project this time is a little bit special because it's installation.
right. So it's basically just you're choosing. You have the freedom as a god
Yeah.
to choose whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like your job. Maybe I should switch at some point
Yeah.
because you're creating this wonderful experiences. Okay. Peter is wondering: do you see ethical challenges with making VR experiences? Putting somebody into a different reality is such a powerful thing to do, and designing for it is crazy to think about. Do you have nightmares, to put it differently?
No. No
You
shame.
sleep well at night?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have any ethical concerns?
Not yet, no.
No, I think it's alright.
Okay. Ferdi Sarat is asking, so how do you create new innovative VR project from scratch? I mean, we discovered that you actually start with
Yeah.
drawings, right?
Yes.
And what would be the next step then? You move it into After Effects? Or?
I think mostly is that when we start, of course, the first thing would be the concept, the idea, and then Bird will start like drafting, like it's just the concept art or like initial sketches, and those sketches always inspire me, and I kind of enjoy like jump directly into the development. I start building prototype, and then I start thinking about what texture I can use, what model I can use, and then I start to construct.
What can you use?
Texture and models.
Models, okay.
Yeah, then I start to construct the world, and then because I think the good thing about prototyping thing in 3D is that you have a free camera movement. So I always put free camera movement so Bird can start looking around, and then he will get more ideas like how to enrich this world and like how can we build up the story.
Right.
And then he will, based on the prototype, will start working more like just inputting more ideas and have more sketches and concept, and then it feed back to me again.
Okay.
And then it's just sort of like the ping pong, and then we keep building and building.
I can only imagine how painful the debugging is, because you have to move between all the different areas and angles. You get dizzy, and I mean, it must be a nightmare actually.
I don't know.
For the debugs?
Yeah.
I don't know, he's money you who have to deal with it.
Yeah, I think it's all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he's always feeding me the good challenge. So,
okay. Yeah. Mike has a question. What format do you export your graphical assets to?
For in 3D.
Yes.
Yes. So I think it depends. I mean, for most the assets, there's JPEG and PNG is enough. But when it comes to lining, especially now the PBR, the physical-based lining, is a really hot topic, and everyone trying to implement the PBR. And then in this case, you need to have high dynamic range images. So either HDR or DDS. I think both of them is doing a really great job.
Okay. Also, like on this experiment, most of it are made by code, basically. Like the whole landscape is made by code, and only the giant is actually a 3D model.
Yeah.
So it was kind of quite core to us to make as much as we can in code.
Yeah.
Okay. What is some of the more interesting, maybe obscure tricks that you're using, or kind of you learned the hard way when designing for VR? Something that you wish you'd known early on, where you spent maybe so much time doing something, but then you wish you'd known that one thing that would have made your life so much easier.
Well, go back to the camera thing. That was like the first thing where we really actually thought we would be a bit stuck, because at first we didn't thought about those kind of chapter things, and we see it more as a kind of film, kind of animation. And when we saw it wasn't working at all, and also performance-wise, it was like too heavy, so everything was crashing, and it's like I wasn't running. So like basically we went to After Effects and like break down the whole. We made an animatic basically, which is a very kind of animation thing to do.
Okay.
And from that, when managed to kind of
Yes.
save the thing.
Yeah, for me, it's actually the whole workflow from creating the asset to exporting the right assets for the developers that we can use in code. And we spend a lot of time searching and experimenting with all kinds of, like, for example, the 3D file format and the right one for the animation, all this stuff, and how to export them, how to model them properly. And I think this is, there's a great learning curve on this thing, and I wish I could know it earlier.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if somebody wants to jump into VR, what would you recommend to do first? Any books or any websites, or just dive in and do whatever?
Yeah, I would say just dive in, but as a developer point of view, I think just go with the base, with the core knowledge of the 3D. It's going to help you in a great way.
Getting kind of to understand how to design for the 3D space and how to model 3D space first.
Yeah, because you're going to need this knowledge. Like the designer always asks you, hey, can we like change this or change that in a 3D world? So you want to be able to quickly respond to this request, and that's where the core knowledge is going to help you.
Okay, all right. So as creatives, we always get to these fantastic ideas when in the shower, or I don't know, in all and inappropriate timings. Do you have many sleepless nights when you just have this idea in your head, like a light bulb, and then you have to make something out of it at night? Or are you more relaxed? Yeah.
I would say it's more relaxed, but it's more like when you got an issue that you don't sleep and think about the issue all the time, and it's obsessive. When it's like a good idea, you just like keep in your mind and say, okay, I'm going to do it tomorrow. For me, I'm talking.
Yeah. I think it's the same. It's like always the thing you want to fix, the performance tweaking, and when it always comes to you when you're just trying to go to bed, and then you have I could do that, and then you start thinking about it.
And then you're stuck. This is it. No sleep. No.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you have a dream project that you want to achieve, like something profound, something really big? If there was a dream project that you'd like to be commissioned for, what would it be?
For me, I think it's going to be the extent of this project we are presenting now. I still after all these years living in Europe and having just learning different cultures, I still feel like the Eastern culture inspires me more. So that's why I started this project with Bertrand. And then I think the dream project for me will be to extend it even more, to make it bigger.
Like bigger.
Bigger, so like multiple projectors and a huge hallway, and so we can actually put the whole storyline into one big canvas. You can just see that from the beginning to the end.
Right.
I think that will be a dream project.
So maybe by the end of this year?
I hope so.
Excellent, thank you so much. Unless you wanted to...
Mine is quite controversial. I would be more like, I would love to make a more comic book.
A book, all right.
A book, yeah. So living
on VR?
Not on VR, but just like making a book, a physical thing.
Okay, maybe we could talk.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Juan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bertrand.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah.